Okay, in this very short video, I just want to then add one layer of detail to our timeline and the other terms we were doing, and to point out a very special and important term in constitutional law. We saw this at work in the Santa Clara case, when the court came up with that idea of corporate personhood. In order to do that, though, and apply the 14th Amendment to the railroad company, remember, you have 3 clauses or 3 freedoms, which means 3 litigation strategies, so you got to choose one. And the others didn't seem to work, and so they seized on the due process clause, and they seized, as I mentioned in another video, on the word liberty. Let me show you why that's important. So when we think about where do we get our rights when we think about freedom of speech or freedom of religion, well, we used to say the First Amendment. So we get our rights from the Constitution itself. There are certain rights that emanate from the Constitution. And then, of course, the Bill of Rights, right to bear arms, right, the right to a fair and speedy trial. And then, of course, amendments, when we feel like there are some rights that we want that aren't in there. So, for example, the 15th Amendment created the right to vote for African Americans, right? So when we feel like, hey, something's missing, we can amend the Constitution and create new rights. This is a very special mechanism for creating new rights. Substantive due process, and let me just give it to you real quick and I'll come back and explain, is the process by which the court adds substance to the word liberty in the due process clause in order to give it new meaning. And so what they did in Santa Clara was they seized on the word liberty and they said, you know what? The liberty to run your business as you see fit is protected by the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. Therefore, these regulations are unconstitutional. Ta-da! See how that works? So they first had to establish that the corporation was a person, and then they had to figure out some place to put this new right. It doesn't work under life. Nobody was threatening the life of these railroad companies. They could talk a little bit about property. Maybe a regulation is interfering with the property. But they seized on the word liberty because, think about it, it's such a sort of vague term. And so what they did in that case, and then to this day, the way that this mechanism works is substantive due process turns the word liberty into an empty vessel. And over the years and the decades, the Supreme Court has added new rights into that container. And so, for example, the right to privacy. It's not mentioned here, it's not mentioned here, it's not mentioned here. So the court used substantive due process to add the idea of a right to privacy to the word liberty in order to give us new rights. So this comes up in a lot of important cases that we'll talk about along the way.